Hi, this is James Rosseau, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Corelink Solution, where we look to empower you through awareness and actionable insights. Statistically, over the years, it has been shown that 80% or more of your opportunities, whether in jobs or business, are developed from your network. So we know the importance of building, maintaining, and leveraging a strong network. On this episode, I welcome my good friend, Billy Dexter, who is a partner at Heidrick and Struggles, a leading worldwide executive search firm. Billy is one of the most profound networkers I've ever met. So I was really excited to finally see the release of his book, Making Your Network, Mastering the Art and Science of Career and Business Networking. During our conversation, Billy shares his story, his professional journey, and of course, we dive into the book. In my estimation, he makes networking accessible through 3 key lesson points that he'll share during this episode. So sit back, buckle up, as we're about to link up with Billy Dexter. Welcome to another episode of the Corelink Solution. I'm pleased to be here with a good friend of mine, the one and only Mr. Billy Dexter. Billy is a partner at Heidrick and Struggles, well over 20 years of being a catalyst with strong industry experience in a number of different areas. I'm not going to even try to name all of them, but think of Billy, think of talent acquisition, think of super connector. A lot of people call him the commish. He'll tell you about that later. He's a speaker and author. His latest book, called Making Your Network, the Art and Science of Career and Business Networking. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Billy Dexter. Billy, thank you for being here, sir.
James, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. We go back a ways.
Yes, we do.
And so I'm just excited for your success.
Thank you.
And just happy to support you and happy to be here.
Good to be here. And we are at, the sun's starting to come out. I was going to call it a rainy day here at the Kellogg School of Management campus. Again, I want to shout out Kellogg for making the campus available to us, both the room, and we just had a lovely lunch. Myself, Billy, Miss Melissa Wilson, and so Billy, we got so many things we can go over. But why don't we start with your journey? I always like to start with people's journey. You've had a interesting journey. You and I met, what was it, back in 2013, 14?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and we both spent some time talking about our journey. So why don't you share a little bit about your journey?
Well, I don't want to take up too much of that time, but as you know, as part of the introduction, you said I'm a partner at Heidrick and Struggles, global executive search firm, and I lead our diversity advisory practice where we help companies find leadership talent across just about every industry. We're in over 30 cities in the U.S. and then over 30 countries outside of the U.S. But as you know, James, my journey didn't start there.
Right.
I am a proud native son of Detroit, Michigan, and I still rep that while I'm here in Chicago. People, even though I've been in Chicago over 25 years, people are like, you're in Chicago. No. I'm a Detroiter. I just happen to be here in Chicago, and I love it.
Right,
but it's not too deep.
You do seem all Chicago.
Yeah, Well, you got to adapt,
right.
But to my core, I'm still a Detroiter. But I grew up in some interesting times when inner city of Detroit, and both my parents from Alabama, and they were part of the Great Migration and came from Alabama to Detroit, and my father came to looking for a better life for his family and landed a job at Ford Motor Company, which gave us a great start. My father really stressed that for you to be a man or for you to be a person in the community, you had to have a job.
That was his exampleship.
Yeah. He would say to me, I might not have all the education, but I have had a job every day since I was 13 years old, and all my children will have a job. And so as a result of that, that's what folks in my family were focused on. And unfortunately, neither one of my parents graduated high school. My father ended up getting a GED, and which allowed him to work in a plant. Had 2 older sisters and an older brother who never graduated high school. So education was not stressed. When I was 13, my parents got a divorce, and my 2 older sisters and older brother were, getting caught up in some of the stuff, inner city from, drugs, and my brother in gangs, and I think both of my sisters had children by the time they were 16. And so they were out of the house. And so my mom, when they got divorced, it was me and my younger brother. Shout out to Pastor Mike Dexter.
Is he back in Detroit?
Yeah, he's back in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a church back in our old neighborhood. I was 13 and he was 12, and I'd never forget my mother sitting us on the side of the bed and said, "Hey, it's just 3 of us now. Mama's going to do whatever she can to take care of us. In a few years, you guys will be 18. You'll be men, and you need to figure this out." 4 or 5 years later, I'm 17. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm stressing because after high school, I got to figure this out. I decided that I had 3 options. One of the options was to get a job, not a career, a job that hopefully had benefits, that you could make a good hourly wage and take care of what you need to do from there. Second option was to join the service, which was a great option. A lot of men in my family had served in the military, so I considered that. And then the third option, and probably the one that was most remote, was to go on to college. Mm-hmm. What made that so remote was, one, no one in my family had ever even graduated high school. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know anyone, James, who had gone to college. So it wasn't even something that was even talked about in my household.
Neighborhood.
No one neighborhood, wow. No one in my family. And what was driving that for me was I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was crystal clear about what I didn't want.
What didn't you want?
I didn't want to get caught up in what my brothers and sisters and the people in my neighborhood of just being caught in the cycle of poverty, making bad decisions on top of bad decisions, and, feeling like, man, there's no way out. So I just wanted to get as far away from that as possible. I had no idea what was on the other end, but I knew exactly what if I stayed here, what that would be. So I decided to pursue this college thing. I wasn't smart enough to go get some help or to go to a guidance counselor. I just decided to do it on my own. And so every Saturday, I would go to the library, and I had a little job bussing tables, and I made $60 a week. So I would take half of that paycheck and get a money order and send off $30 to a college application. By the time I finished that process, I had applied to 16 schools, and unfortunately for me, all 16 turned me down. However, one of the 16 schools turned me down, but at the bottom of the letter, they said, if you would like to discuss this decision, give us a call and make an appointment. And so I did.
What number was it because you were doing this week by week, so what, do you remember?
Yeah, it was probably around 12 or 11,
That's a lot of rejection to go through.
Yeah. And, ironically, I saved all those rejection letters, and I still have them.
Why is that?
I needed it to prove to be that you can get past rejection. First problem, Saginaw is 2.5 hours away from Detroit. We do not have a car. Okay?
It's pre-Uber.
It's pre-Uber. Yeah, none of that. The second thing was to skip school. And unbeknownst to my parents, his family, we made the journey. So I get in there, and the first thing the lady asked me was, "Where's my parents?" And I said, "Well, they had to work." She said, "How did you get up here?" I said, "Well, my cousin brought me, told another little white lie." And she said, "Well, where is he?" I go, "Well, he's in the parking lot." So, the two of y'all came all the way from Detroit? Yes, ma'am. Wow. Okay. Come on in, have a seat. And little did I know that it would take her less than 2 minutes to render a decision. And for those of you that are out there listening, when you don't have people in your life that, stress education, things like this happen. And what it was that I never failed a class, but my understanding was a C passes. So my goal was to get a C. Why would I work harder to get an A or B if the goal was the C to pass? So now I'm a senior. Then she's looking at my transcripts, and all I got is C's. And I was proud of that. I was like, I passed. Now, keep in mind, I got parents and older siblings that dropped out.
That dropped out. They didn't finish high school.
Right. So the bar was set at high school. So it took her 2 minutes to say, Mr. Dexter, there's nothing here in your transcript that would indicate that you could be successful here. I'm sorry. We have standards, and you've got to. I'd like to tell this when I tell the story. I round it up to a 2.4, but it was like really a 2.38. So something like that. There's nothing here that would indicate that you could be successful. And James, I don't know where I pulled this from, but I looked at her and said, "That's not who I am. All I need is a chance for somebody to believe in me and give me a chance. I know I could do this. I could be successful."
Right.
And so we went back and forth for a little bit, and she still said no. But I think I made an impression on her. So as I got up to leave, she said, "Wait a minute. I'm impressed that you made the effort to come up here. And we owe you our best. So I'm going to talk with the director of admissions on Monday and see if there's anything that we can do. But I need to tell you something. I need you to hear me. It doesn't look good, but we're going to give you our best.
Wow.
Give me a couple weeks and you'll hear from us." Finally, I got that letter. And I opened the letter, and in first word says, "Congratulations. You've been admitted on probation. And if you could get a C average for the first semester, we'll consider you for full admission."
Wow.
Like, I can do
that.
C.
I can do a C.
I know that. But so anyway, and it's a long story, but I share that with you because it started a journey for me that continues to this day of defying the odds, looking at obstacles that are potentially obstacles and finding a way to get around them, not letting certain things limit me. And so
there's so many nuggets in that story. And I asked you to tell the story because, there's so many people, I believe, that are listening to this podcast. And again, we do this because we want to empower people, again, through awareness and actionable insights. And a lot of times, I'm a big believer in people chasing their passion and personal leadership development. And there are at least three things in your story that jump out to me. One, when we're in the midst of people who've never done it before, modeled it, it's hard to go after it.
Yes.
Right? There's no model. There's no groove in the woods. So it's like, well, no one else has done it. So I should be like Ward and just run off the table.
Right.
And you didn't choose that option.
Yeah.
You said,
well, to that point, when you don't have a clear direction, this is one of the first things I learned, but you know what you don't want, let's go the opposite way.
Right.
Now, I have no idea what's the opposite way.
Right.
And man, I just wanted to break the cycle.
Right. That was the second thing. Right. You break the cycle. I don't know what I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. So, because a lot of times we say, well, you should, you should run to, not run from. Well, this is an example. Well, running from works.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And then the third thing is, after rejections start, it's easy to go, well, you know what, man? Daggone, I'm done. I just give up, man. Fourth rejection letter, they're all going to be the same way. I'm not even going to open the rest.
Right.
When the envelopes show up, I'm just going to throw them in the fire pit. I'm not going to look at the rest of them. What if you wouldn't have opened the 12th?
Yeah.
Right? So that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is, after taking a trip and the woman turns and says no, you could have just sunk your shoulders and walked out. But having the gut, the feeling, the fervor, the passion, the commitment to say, no. I just need a shot.
Yeah.
I need a shot.
Yeah.
Just give me a shot.
Yeah.
Right? And then after she said no, to be respectful enough not to be overbearing and to get disrespectful.
Right.
But that you said your piece. Now you start to turn and go, you know what? I'm going to take another shot for you. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm going to take another shot for you. And that's a balance, right?
Yeah.
To be committed, have conviction, have confidence, but not be overbearing to a point where you disrespect someone too, right? And it's a tough balance sometimes.
Yeah. And I tell you, James, I remember thinking somebody was going to give me a shot because this is something that I knew would change things for me, but I had no idea how.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the biggest thing in that story, and I can honestly say this, years later, sometimes we make decisions early in our life or in our career that have lifelong results. I never would have thought that making a decision to skip school that day and go up there and beg them for an opportunity would not only change my life, but it would change the trajectory of my family's life by one single decision that I made at 17.
How about that? So now you come forth, man, and you've had an illustrious career. So many things we could talk about. I would love to move to the book, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the book is just phenomenal. I'm going to advise everyone, really get this book because it's called Making Your Network, The Art and Science of Career and Business Networking. And I'll just give you guys a thought. So I met Billy again back in 2014 when my wife and I moved to Chicago when we were making our transition from JP Morgan Chase to my role at All. And met Billy through a mutual friend. And by meeting Billy, he basically helped me establish my Chicago network for the most part, right? I knew a few new folks out there. Monica Hawkins introduced us, right? Good. Shout out to Monica, right, out in D.C. And Monica said, "Hey, you got to meet my friend Billy out there. Billy will help make sure you meet some folks." I had met all the folks at Allstate, obviously, but he'll make sure you meet some folks. And true to her words, Billy did exactly that, a super connector. And in fact, Billy is the main reasons I wrote a book.
Yeah.
Because Billy and I were sitting up at the restaurant.
Yeah.
You told your story.
Right.
I shared my story. 2 men up in the restaurant crying at lunch. Right? Okay.
And we tried to remain cool.
We both sitting there trying not to cry and whatnot.
Right.
And I told you about my story. And I said, hey, and I happened to write a lot of that down. You said, man, I think that's a book.
Right.
And I said, no, that's not a book. You said, yeah, I think that's a book. And I said, nah. You said, well, you mind if I introduce you to somebody who could really give you an evaluation as a book, and you introduced me to Melissa Wilson.
Right, yes.
And the rest of it is history.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah. So now tell us about how you got to get into this point of doing this book, Making Network.
I really got excited about the topic of networking when I was in graduate school. I was a graduate student at Michigan State, and we had to teach, had to partner with someone in a class, a good friend of mine now, Rodney Patterson. I had to partner with him, and we had to teach a class. And it was called EAD 415. It was a leadership class. And so we had to create the syllabus and what we were going to talk about. And Rodney's just a natural professor, teacher, educator. And so he was pretty much doing all the work. And then we got down to says, well, man, what can I contribute? And so he helped me. He said, well, you always are good with connecting with people. You should put some thoughts together. So back in 1988, I came up with kind of a 3-part workshop called Making Your Network.
Gotcha.
And that's how it started. And so it's been over 25 years that I have been talking about this topic and traveling around the country and talking to college students, because I used to manage university relations and college recruiting for United Airlines and Motorola. And so I was on college campuses around the country talking about this topic of making your network. And then that advanced on to being asked to speak on this topic at conferences and conventions. And at the end of that, people would always say, wow, you should write a book. And I never thought of myself as an author, and matter of fact, even steered away from it. And I always had the same response was, thank you, but I don't see myself as an author. But it was until I met Melissa Wilson, who incidentally is my co-author, who's an executive book coach, and who said the same thing that I'd heard 100 times.
Right.
You ought to write a book, and I can help you.
Right.
Just sit down and have lunch with me, and I'll tell you how we can do that. Mm-hmm. And so she explained it to me, and that's how we started the journey.
It's interesting. I was reading through it, and then I got to a certain point, and I'm like, wait a minute. You know how a lot of times you taking notes outside the book?
Yeah.
Then I finally went back and said, no, I'm going to write them right in the book.
Okay.
Right? I don't know about you. My Bible's the same way.
Yeah.
Certain things I just want to write there because so I want to go right back there.
To it. Yeah,
right?
Keep that same thought.
Yeah, right. And I found that in your book. And one of the things I wrote down for you, because I know I owe you something for the hardcover, is to me, one of the things that jumps out is we all know intuitively how important networking is, but whether it's consciously or subconsciously, there are two things that happen to most of us. Either one, we have a natural fear that, I'm going to go into this room and I'm going to be uncomfortable, or it's going to feel disingenuous, or, you know what I mean? We got this list, right? And one of the things I love that you do early in the book, either the first chapter or second chapter, is kind of disarm people with that list of 10 things.
Yeah.
That you go, these are the common things, right? Here's what they are, right?
Let's just put them out
Let's just put them out there early on. Let's get that out the way. So it's like, dang, man, you took them all away from me, right? Because most people build up through all this thing, over the course of the book, and you're like, let's get them out the way. But then the second thing is you turn it on its head by saying, well, look, it's not about asking. It's about giving first.
Yes.
And when you do that, you just made it crazy easy. And maybe that's just my personality type, right? It could just be me. But when you turned it to just giving first, then it makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that, and I know that to be true for you in terms of how you operate.
Yeah.
But how have other folks kind of received it? What's the feedback been like? I'm curious.
And it's interesting that you make that observation, because that's a core tenet of the book, and we don't throw that in your face at the book, but that's one of the things that we want you to walk away with, that you network not to get, but to give.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if you do that the right way, it comes back to you tenfold.
Right.
Okay.
Without asking.
Right. And so I kind of stumbled onto that concept, James, and I don't want to be stereotypical here, but as men, sometimes, we get, to feeling good about ourselves, and it's hard for us to ask. I got this. I don't need, I'll figure this out. And I was, guilty of that too. So I had the same apprehensions as other people, around networking. I don't want to seem like I'm begging, or I'm just stalking somebody. So I said, well, what I am comfortable with is being helpful. And that doesn't cost me anything. Matter of fact, it disarms people. And so I started doing it that way. I started listening, and as I started listening to folks, I started to think, man, how can I be helpful? Maybe I could introduce them to someone else, or maybe I could invite them to an event, or maybe I could recommend someone, or share a book, or just be there to, hey, you need someone to go there with you? I'm free. Let's, when I did that, one, it made me more comfortable with the process of networking. And then over time, I started to, as I poured into people, and I would always lead with the question, man, how can I be helpful? And I think about you and I, when we were both sitting there sharing our souls, I'm thinking the whole time as I'm listening, man, how can I be helpful to James? Okay.
Right.
And so, over time, just kind of, perfecting that and being an active listener, and listening with the intent of, how can I be helpful? So it took away, anything that felt dirty, because I'm giving. As I started going through my career, James, I just had some amazing experiences where at least on 5 occasions, jobs were created around my background. Well, there was no interview. I developed a connection where I'm helping. We've got a great friendship, and it's, hey, have you ever thought about this? We've been thinking about doing something, and I was the first person that they created that job around. Okay. And so as that started to continue to happen, people started observing and go, man, dude, how does this happen? And so I didn't want it to stop, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I became a little obsessed around trying to figure that out. I remember talking to the networking guru, George Fraser. I had a chance to meet him, and we actually had a chance to go to lunch, and I was just dying to ask him this question. George, I've had all these great things. I gave him all these examples. And he said, oh, Billy, that's real clear to me what you're doing. One, people feel good about you. Made a great connection, okay? You've led with trying to be helpful, and they want to be helpful back. Right. And so they're looking at you and going, wow, this guy could help us. So as I learned that, I then just started kind of perfect that and just have always led. And even the job that I'm in at Heidrick right now, which in January will be 10 years. This job didn't exist.
Is that right?
No, no. They had no partner that was leading a diversity advisory practice.
You were at MTV Networks right before this, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was at MTV and executive vice president and chief diversity officer. And through doing that job, and it's one of the things I talk about, I had a devastating situation where I come in one day for a meeting I reported to the CEO, and they told me, hey, we decided to go in a different direction. We've eliminated, 5 jobs on the leadership team, and one of them is yours. So I was pretty devastated. From that, I took a couple months and felt sorry for myself, and then decided, okay, I'm just going to consider that as the first chapter of my career, and I'm going to start over. I'm going to rebrand myself. What is it that I want to do? I figured that out, that it was executive search. And then I proceeded to try and develop contacts and relationships. Right. And my thinking at the time was, man, if I could get a meeting with one of these CEOs of one of these search firms, I could close them. Because I knew the search firms didn't really have an answer for what I could bring to the table.
Gotcha.
I did my research, and I happened to get a meeting with the CEO of Heidrick. And one of the most amazing things happened when I finally got into that meeting and walked into his office. And as we introduced ourselves, and he said, Billy, have a seat. I was sitting here thinking, trying to jot down the names of how many people have told me, you got to meet this Billy Dexter guy. And so I had been working all my angles. I didn't know if any of them were working. But they all got to him. And so he was intrigued to have a meeting. And we found, as I have learned to do, we didn't jump in and start talking about, the opportunity. We talked about things that we had in common. Talked about, my passion for talent acquisition and what I knew and how I was committed to this. And he talked about his, and we talked about that we love golf and all these other things that led to, it was almost not till the end of the meeting that I then said, hey, I'd love to talk with you about how I could be helpful. We had an hour. We probably spent 5 minutes talking about the opportunity. Right. But as I left, he said, look, I'd love to figure out how we could have you to come in as a consultant. You could help us see around the corners on some things that we've got blind spots on. Right. And then you could take a look at us and see if this is something that you want to do.
Was this Kevin at the time?
This is Kevin Kelly. Yeah. Yeah. That's how I ended up getting at Heidrick. Yeah. And basically matching, my interest to this job, and they created the role around my background. And so a long way to answer your question was, it's just been a process of making connections, valuing relationships, and opportunity has presented itself, whether it's for me or whether it's for the other person on the other side.
Right. As people read the book and absorb it, what do you hope the impact of the book is?
Well, James, I would love for people to walk away with 3 things. People say you need to go out and network. From our research, most people have no idea what that means. Networking is the end result, but what you really need to learn how to do is how to make great connections, okay? Find out, things that you have in common and really listen and get to know folks. So if people can learn that process of how to make connections, and then from there learn the process of networking. And what I mean by that is developing a strategy and being intentional and deliberate around that. Okay. A lot of people, networking is something that I'm going to do on Thursdays from 5 to 7. Okay. And I contend that every day you walk in and out of networks. Okay. You think of a typical day, whether you're on a train or the bus or in your car, and you walk in through the lobby and you're on the elevator, you're in meetings with people, you go to lunch, you go to the gym afterwards, or you go to an event.
Right.
All different times to meet and make connections. We call that being awake in the network. And if you put together a strategy and a process around making those connections and being intentional and deliberate, we want people to walk away with that. And then the third thing is to really understand the networking philosophy that we talk about in the book, that you network to give, not to get. And that's difficult for a lot of people, because some people, I don't really know if I have anything to give. Everyone has something to give, whether it's just your time, whether it's just sending an email, whether it's accompanying someone on something or connecting them with another person. I mean, there's all types of ways. And if you walk away with those 3 things from the book, I would be extremely excited.
That's awesome. It's funny because when you read through certain parts of the book, I read there's one part of the book. Let me find it. The active, deep listening, professional intimacy. And I read those things and I wrote a note to myself. These things take time investment, which today is harder than ever, because we all move. But if they're important, you slow down. And I say that because I'm an observer, right? And I remember when I first met you, you picked me up. And it probably wasn't the first time we ate. The second time or so, I said, I noticed you didn't check your phone during the meal. You're not checking his phone, right? So then you made me feel guilty about looking at my phone.
Right.
Right. So I put my phone down. Right. Then we went, the next one we got together and we went down to the cigar bar.
Right.
And I noticed the rest of the crew, that particular connection group, was the same way. They valued each other's time that way. There was a value placed on that time together. And that says a lot around the intimacy of the relationships, around the value placed in the relationship. So I think, when people take in this book, I would ask you guys, I'm asking you all to get the book, because to Billy's point around these 3 points, making great connection, learning the process and understanding the network of philosophy, within that thread around making these connections is the value placed on those relationships.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and really being, to your point, intentional, which is a great word.
Yeah.
Really being intentional.
Well, and it's interesting. You and I have never talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting that you made that observation around our first time that we got together. One of the best compliments that I have gotten, and I've received it many times, is that, friends or colleagues have said, man, Billy, when I'm talking to you, you're all in.
You're giving a person your full attention, right?
Yeah.
And that's important. That's important.
And that's something that I've learned, James, and it's very important to me. Yeah. And sometimes I don't know if people feel that, right. but I practice that, and I want to be in the moment. And that compliment that I get is people feel that. Right. That and they may think that I'm not listening, but I'm taking it in.
Right.
I mean, and even something as simple as when people say, well, Billy, how do you remember all these people that you meet? I'm intentional and deliberate about everything. People generally say their name around the same time. Okay? 10 minutes later, you could totally forget because you didn't lock that in. Okay? A practice that I have is when we meet each other, I make sure that I repeat your name back to you. You say, James Rosseau. I go, James, Billy Dexter. But what that's triggering is I'm locking in something about you. And so, years later, when we come back, I may not remember automatically, but something that I locked in will bring me back to, that's James. And the strategy behind that is being intentional and deliberate. One of the other observations, and we talk about it in the book, is understanding your networks. I talk about, formal, informal, and semi-formal organizations, and I'm probably involved in about 30 of them. Okay. I serve on 6 boards. I have 2 beautiful young daughters that are twins that are 7 years old. I'm a passionate golfer. I enjoy a good cigar and scotch. I've got all these things, and people go, and then I travel 30% of the time. They go, how do you do that? Very simple. James, all those things that I'm doing, all those organizations, every one of those boards that I'm on are things that I'm passionate about, that I'm interested in. Okay? I don't do anything that I'm not passionate or interested in. And thus the result is those are things that I would do for free if I had. So it's not a drag on my time. Things that I'm excited about. Absolutely. I serve on the board of the Goodman Theater. My wife and I are passionate about theater. I'm a member of one of the top cigar clubs in the country. And that's actually not necessarily for me. It's for my people in my network that enjoy cigars. We can get together and we sit for 3 or 4 hours. And guess what we're doing? We're connecting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we happen to have a cigar and a nice drink, but that's it. I serve on the board of the Executive Leadership Council. It's 700 of the most senior executives, which I recommended to become a member of.
That's exactly
I serve
right.
on the board of that group. Mm-hmm. But that's allowing me to be able to give back, help people get on boards, help them, with their career. Okay, that's stuff that I love to do. Started a golf league. Called the Circle of Friends. We've got about 75 brothers who play golf, and whenever the tour has their version of that major, we have our version of that. We're 17 years in. Okay, guys are doing business together. If guys have been in each other's weddings, we travel together. We've connected our wives and family. But it's around golf. I don't spend any time on things that I'm not passionate or very interested about. And I'm intentional and deliberate around all those things.
That's awesome. Listen, gang, I really want to encourage you to pick up the book, Making Your Network. And where, Billy, if anyone wants more information about you or how to reach you, what's the best way?
You can find my story on billydexter.com, www.billydexter.com. The book is available on Amazon, and I'm pretty easy to
reach. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the last question, which is so hard for you because you know too many people, but you only can pick one.
Okay.
So since this program is about, empowering people through awareness and actionable insight, we want to bring more people on like you. So who else do you know that you think we should know? Who else should we invite to this program?
Well, one of my really good friends, James, who like you have met, Orlando Ashford. Orlando is currently the president of Holland America Cruise Lines. And he's one of my closest buddies. We have met, and he became a client of mine. And then my wife, I talk about him in the book. My wife worked at Motorola, and she actually worked under Orlando. And he was building his man cave in his new house, and he would talk about his plans all the time. I was doing the same thing. And my wife said, "Man, you sound just like my husband." He said, "Well, I'd love to meet him." And that was about 17 years ago. And we found that we had so many different things in common, and we've been connected ever since. And
love to have him.
And he is. What's fascinating about our story is that not only have our careers and personal lives, found connections, we support each other, personally and professionally. I remember when he took the job with Carnival Cruise Lines and was asked to be the president, of that. And he called me and said, man, I need to talk to you about this opportunity. I'm thinking about it. And so we talked about it, and I basically said, man, Orlando, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. And then he said, well, you know what? I think I'm going to do this, but there's one problem. I have never been on a cruise ship.
Better go take one.
Right. So his first cruise was as the president of Holland American. And he has been breaking records.
I know it.
And just doing phenomenal things. But it started with one of the things he and I have in common, which I would love for you to explore, is just not being afraid to get out of our own way sometimes, because we limit ourselves around the potential. And the last thing I will say is I was really fortunate this past Saturday to be the commencement speaker for the University of Phoenix graduating class.
Yes, congratulations again.
And was an amazing opportunity. But one of the things that I shared with them was, what would I tell Billy, who sat in your seat back in 1985, and over 30 years later, what one thing would piece of advice that I would give? I actually gave him three things, but the one thing that was most important was getting that degree changed everything for me. Because I now saw everything was in front of me. Anything was possible. Okay? So many people told me I wasn't college material. Not only did I get a bachelor's degree, but I got a master's degree from Michigan State. Right. So over 30 years ago, that single act opened up possibilities.
Changed the way you saw the possibilities.
Yeah. Who would have ever thought that I'd volunteered to take on a project to work in Malaysia on the other side of the world? Who would ever thought that I would have become an author? Who would have ever thought the same university that denied me admission and told me I wasn't college material asked me to come back and deliver the commencement address 32 years later?
Amazing.
So I'm just excited to be with you.
Thank you.
Man, I wish you so much success on the podcast, and thanks for listening to my story.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for linking up with me for another episode of the Corelink Solution. You're informed, empowered, and now you can be accountable. Ignite your career, folks. There are 3 key points, again, from this episode with Billy. Point number 1, make great connections. Before focusing on networking, focus on generally making great connections with people. Be human. Point number 2, have a plan and understand the process. Be strategic. It's about a plan. As he said, it's much bigger than something you do on Thursday from 5 to 7 at a particular event. Billy, again, he talked about that each of us walk into and out of different networks all throughout the day. From meeting to meeting, elevator to elevating, from meal time to gym time, we are in and out of networks and should look at how to capitalize on them by having a plan of how we approach it. And then point number 3, learn the philosophy that you network to give, not to get. This reduces the pressure we all feel. This helps us really go into it again, being human. And then things will come over time. As he pointed out, and I've experienced myself, you get by just giving. It will come without you asking. If you find the podcast to be of value, please subscribe, rate, and review on whatever service you listen to it through. This program is about empowering you through awareness and actionable insights. As you listen to the episodes, you may have questions. Here's some things that are new to you, terminology you may not have heard before. All of those things are good, and I am here to serve. You can go to our website at thecorelinkSolution.com, and right below the show notes, you'll see a comment section. You can ask your questions there. You can mention challenges you face in the areas we cover, and you can even tell me what other guests you'd like to hear from. Alternatively, you can address the same things through any of the social media channels such as Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Until the next time, be informed, be empowered, be accountable.